What's up, sons? It's Blind Red with Son of a Tech. Once again, joining me today is Doug Popovich, the founder of Vybe Token. It is a cryptocurrency that you can earn via different social media interactions. Go ahead and Doug, give us the high-level overview of what it is, what is integrated with it, and what users can expect from your platform.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me on your show. You have a great show, so it's an honor and pleasure to be here. Yeah, Vybe. We do a couple different things. Your show is all about mining in many ways, and one of our use cases is you can mine your social media. So we have two primary use cases, and that's one of them. We tokenize. You can tokenize your likes. So what that means is, like, what if you got a nickel or a penny or a dime for every like you got on your social media accounts? That's what Vybe does. We have our application will connect your social media accounts to a cryptocurrency wallet, and once a day, it'll tokenize your likes and automatically send those likes to your wallet. So it's a platform for content creators in many ways, and allows you to, it basically takes those hearts that you get on Instagram or something and puts them in your wallet. One social media company, for example, last year made $19 million, billion dollars, I'm sorry, $19 billion. And, what was their content? What was their product? Well, it was your content. They sold that. And how much of that 19 billion did they give back to you, to the creators? Basically zero, right? So this process, our algorithm, makes it possible to have better control of your content and mine your social media. We are connected to Facebook, Twitter, Reddit, YouTube, and TikTok. We can also do Instagram, but it has to go through your Facebook because we have an agreement with Meta through their APIs. So that's our primary, that's our mining mechanism, really, to distribute our token Vybe to the world. And then we have another use case called Bounty Hunter.
Okay, so how does that work exactly from a technical perspective? Because blockchains, obviously, when we get to talking about that on the back end, we're going to have, some sort of node infrastructure that's going to provide consensus, and then you're going to have the miners themselves traditionally in something like Bitcoin or Ethereum, or well, let's go with Bitcoin. You take computer hardware, you point it at the network, it solves it, and then it processes that transaction through the mining, and then the nodes go ahead and provide consensus. In an alternate method that's obviously been gaining traction with Ethereum, you have proof of stake, where essentially you put up a certain amount of funds that is still being run technically through computational process on the wherever you have that stored as far as the node goes and so on. Then that provides consensus to the network. So what is providing consensus to the network for Vybe? How does that work?
Yeah, so we don't even have to touch that. We just plug into existing social media accounts, and once a day, if you mine, we excavate those likes off your accounts through the APIs. So the technical mechanism there is the API access, and then our algorithm, which runs automatically, it excavates those likes and tokenizes them, turns them into the Vybe token, and then automatically sends that to your wallet. So you get a deposit every day at 1600 hours UTC if you're mining your social media. So, you'll see, for example, we would be doing more of what you're talking about if we were creating our own platform or our own blockchain, and we're not. We're using the Algorand blockchain because it has fast and cheap transactions. I mean, that's what we really need. So the actual consensus mechanism and all the tech behind that is we're just sitting on top of Algorand. One thing that you'll see a lot of people create like a new Instagram, like the Instagram of crypto or the Twitter of crypto, right? Because it makes perfect sense. Instead of being paid in hearts and tweets and thumbs up and likes, like, why aren't you paid in tokens? And it's a good idea, and you should be, right? But these platforms came along before cryptocurrency. So you'll see people try to replicate them with an Instagram of crypto type social media platform. Well, we're not doing that because those platforms have a big challenge. They have to onboard a critical mass of users. And, people don't want to leave their Twitter. They don't want to leave their Facebook. Their pictures are on there, their timeline, their friends, that sort of thing. So We're not trying to do that. We're not trying to replicate that. We're not trying to replicate a blockchain. We're just plugging in basically through an API that we have to get agreement from these platforms, which we have a couple of them, and then excavating like that. And so, if, for example, tomorrow Instagram was no longer popular and there was another one, we could just unplug from Instagram or something and plug into the other one. So we try to keep the tech as simple as possible and use all the existing tech that's out there instead of trying to reinvent the blockchain, so to speak.
Well, perfect. That's kind of the answers that I think the technical crowd would want to understand is that essentially what it sounds like is Vibe is a token built on top of the Algorand blockchain. And then
Yeah.
you're just facilitating the integration between the APIs for
Yes.
current social media platforms and tying that into a monetizable or preferably at the end of the day, a monetizable platform
Yes.
for creators and so on. And so that's really interesting. I like that it's kind of integrating current, I guess, platforms
Yeah.
because moving into I think like the big thing that's been taking Bitcoin by storm lately and cryptocurrency in general from the social media perspective has been Noster, right? And that's been a really interesting kind of revelation here recently. But it's kind of at the point to where it has to have all of the social media platforms that it integrates with rebuild from the ground up on
Right.
blockchain.
Yeah.
Um, so that's kind of
Yeah.
a different you're taking it from a different approach, right?
Yeah, we're just taking the existing infrastructure and trying to plug in and build into that and keep it quick and fast and as easy to build as possible. I definitely think that that's the way we're going, with the metaverse and some of these larger social media efforts. But for now, we just are riding on top of the existing platforms. Now, I like to say that we're not entirely a cryptocurrency company. We're a company that uses crypto, and we do that because cryptocurrency can do things that banks and third parties can't do. Banks and credit cards, and one of those things is microtransactions and these types of microtransactions. You couldn't do this with banks and credit cards. You can do this with crypto. That's why we're using this technology because there is value in that. And what we need is just a fast and cheap blockchain to do that. There's a number out there. By comparison, I love Ethereum, for example. I've been in crypto a while, but if we were working on layer one Ethereum and trying to make 10,000 transactions a month, last I calculated that cost over $6,000-7,000 or something.
Mhm.
But if you have a fast blockchain, it's cheap, and you can do these microtransactions, then it's under $3 a month for us or something to make just a massive of transactions every day. So yeah, we're not trying to.
No worries. So the biggest question I think that's going to come out of this, obviously right away off the bat, pops into my head is what is going to provide or what provides the value for the Vibe token?
Yeah, good question. So it's a deer walking front. Super Bowl Sunday, I'm at my house. And my dog I got these mastiffs. They can see some deer in the front yard. I'm in Virginia. They're going crazy. Um, yeah. So we provide the liquidity right now. So if you mine your tokens and your Vibe, you can turn around and sell that on DEX immediately for Algo, Bitcoin, Ether, whatever you want on a decentralized exchange. So we're creating the liquidity right now. But we do think that there's value. I mean, selling $19 billion worth of off Instagram of content, there's value in that. It's not being captured. And so we're trying to capture some of that. Let me give you another example well, let me step back even a second further, because I think people in general, not your audience and not, the crypto community, they get it. But some people just, they look at crypto and they look at blockchain and all they see is the volatility and, some of the exit scams and drama, which is another reason I love cryptocurrency, because there's always, it's kind of a telenovela sometimes. But sometimes they just don't see the value. So, quick example, I was trying to buy a car in India once, 2014. And I had to do that. I had to transfer $25,000 from my bank account in the United States, which is USAA, very good bank account, a bank, right? Like a large, well-known bank, to the Toyota dealership in Mumbai, India. This is Mumbai. They call it the maximum city, 22 billion people. This isn't some podunk village. And it was the Toyota dealership. That transaction, it took 2 months to get that money out of my bank in the United States to the Toyota dealership in Mumbai. I had to wake up several times in the middle of the night, ask my bank where it's at. For some reason, which I still don't understand, it had, in the SWIFT system, it had to go through 2 different banks in New York City. I had to pay a couple $100 in transaction fees at least. Obviously, if that dealership took cryptocurrency, I could have done that, from my phone to their phone, peer to peer, within 10 minutes for, under $10 or something. So there's real value in crypto. That's one example. Another example is microtransactions. That's what we're using. The other product that we have, Bounty Hunter, also capitalizes heavily on these microtransactions and their ability to, generate value and revenue from that.
So you brought up Swift. I did want to kind of a tangent here, but I wanted to get your thoughts on what is happening currently with Swift's limitation on cryptocurrency and blocking transactions under $100,000. Are you aware of that?
Yeah, Satoshi had me at screw the banks, when I first read about cryptocurrencies. So yeah, and the IRS trying to go after transactions, over $600 or something, I believe it is. It's a bit frustrating, the government's moving millions of dollars, and yet, the at the same time, the U.S. government is trying to monitor, and another fear is China. China's looking at the blockchain and saying, hey, actually, we're able to track every single coffee transaction you have, if we do this right, and we force people onto our state centralized blockchain and cryptocurrency. That's a bit concerning. One, because they'd be able to track every transaction. But what if they say, okay, we're not going to pay you, or we're going to shut off your wallet if you don't do X, Y, and Z. You don't comply, you don't stay in during a lockdown, something like that. So, what you're talking about is very interesting. And my hope is that the U.S. has always been a place of innovation and giving people the freedom to innovate and play with the tech and see what we're dealing with, and then also create the regulatory framework that we need in a responsible way that doesn't strangle the tech, but still allows large hedge funds, pension funds, big players with big money to enter the space and the market, and prevent some of the other, at the other extreme, some of the scams that we've had and failures that we've had with FTX recently, for example.
Right. And I mean, like it becomes a complicated situation, especially if you're trying to adhere to the fundamentals of cryptocurrency. Like you had mentioned earlier, you kind of like F the banks, that kind of those fundamentals. And I've even shifted here recently as I look at it closer to where I really honestly think the frontline defense to a CBDC is the banks, right? Because as an individual, we don't really have much power over the government deciding to deploy a CBDC. You want your tax return, you're going to have to, utilize our FedNow app and get adopted into the central bank digital currency. You want to receive Medicaid, you want to receive any government funding or at all, period. Well, integrate with the CBDC, and that's how they onboard people. A lot of people tell me that the US citizens wouldn't onboard, and I'm like, I think they would immediately. If you have, a $7,000 tax return and the only way you can access that is through a federal government blockchain, then you're going to do that, right? And
absolutely.
Yeah, so I think the first line of defense will, oddly enough, now be banks versus the federal government, because they're going to say, hold on, you can't just destroy the entire banking industry. because consolidate that all underneath the nation state, because once you do that, like, the banks are screwed and you're going to collapse the
Yeah,
economy, right? So
yeah,
I
yeah,
do think that that's the first line. It's almost like I've been reading like the 48 laws of power and so on recently, and
yeah,
it kind of talks about sitting back and letting your enemies fight it out. The enemy of
yeah,
my enemy is my friend. And I'm like, all
yeah,
right, so the banks are kind of our friend right now in this weird
yeah,
world that's going on, especially specifically in China, as you mentioned, as well as the UK, because what the UK has said is that they are utilizing China's example of a digital currency. And it's like, so wait, you're going to take something from a country that is basically completely opposed to your democratic process that you've
yeah.
shifted into, and apply the same monetary system. That doesn't really make any sense at all. I don't even know why that's a discussion over there right now.
Yeah, no, I agree completely. China's moving fast in that direction, and they can, use it as a force of control. Um, it's a incredibly liberating blockchains and cryptocurrency, incredibly liberating technology. But at the same time, if you twist it and bend it, it can be used in a terrible way also. Well, it's not even that. They're centralizing it then. It's not the same thing. But it's like the internet, there's a ton of great stuff out there on the internet, and there's a ton of really bad stuff as well. I tell my kids, they spend time on playing games and on the internet and all that. And I said, hey, you're either consuming or you're creating. Yeah, you go work out, you have a tough day, you can do your homework, fine. Get on there and just consume a little bit, watch videos, flick through stuff, great, no problem. But at the same time, you got to force yourself to create. Also, use those tools in a positive and constructive way. So this technology is just moving so fast. Uh, my quick side story: my great grandfather was born in 1900. He died in 1996. When he was born in 1900, there was no what? There was no cars. There's no airplanes. Obviously there was no internet phones, mobile phones. In the course of his lifetime, we put a man on the moon. By the time he died, there was internet, there was mobile phones, computers, technology. Just the amount of change that he experienced his lifetime was exponential and amazing compared to the previous generation. And so, if our children experience that same amount of change, it's going to be quite. We can't even fathom it. I mean, some of this is just happening faster than anybody can control it. And actually, I think that's in our favor in some ways. When you talk about regulatory process and the government almost can't keep up. And the United States government, for example, was designed to work for the people and to be somewhat weak. Um, and that I think is helpful for innovation because it just starts moving so fast that you know, well, the AI and Chat GPT and stuff you're seeing this now. You're like, what? What are we creating, and where is this going? So it's really interesting.
So ChatGPT is an example of like being able to catch something extremely innovative really quickly and understand how to utilize it. So
Yeah.
by trade, I'm a Linux systems administrator, right? So what I work with
Oh,
is
oh well. Yeah.
basically creating bash scripts and stuff, learning what the input is to get the proper output that then makes me successful. And I think that the biggest tool that's on the horizon that you need to learn how to use is going to be chat gpt, because
Yeah.
all humans are going to basically come down to, like, the number one skill is going to be understanding how to provide the correct prompt to get the correct answer. And the people that are dangerous with that are going to be extremely successful, right? And that's no different. You can see the evolution from that. Like, the most successful people in the IT realm, which is what I work in, have previously just been really, really good at Google. Like, that is really pretty much what it is. They're really good at Google and things like GitHub, and then
Hmm.
that's pretty
Yeah.
much how it goes. So we were talking a little bit about knowing inputs and being able to be dangerous, I guess, with those prompts. I kind of, if you had some thoughts surrounding that as far as AI goes, especially from the perspective of what has been changing in almost like, I suppose, like creating content, right? Because this is where it already is extremely dangerous and effective, is creating written content, scripts for YouTube, all this type of stuff. It's
Yeah.
things I've started like
Yeah.
doing on my side. I've been essentially training my chat GPT to understand my perspective on Bitcoin and cryptocurrency, and then start
Yeah.
helping me hone in and like edit scripts and create like all of my
Mm,
guides and stuff like that, because it can basically clean it all up. And I'll tell it,
yeah.
okay, rework this again, rework this again.
Uh,
And then it starts throwing in stuff like from like what I said to it like 3 weeks ago. And it's like, oh, and then
huh.
you had mentioned this. So like it kind of like throws
Uh,
it into the script because it's related, right? I started training it with like all the terms like FUD, like fear, uncertainty, and doubt, and
mhm.
like telling it like
Yeah.
what that means. And it's funny, it'll start placing that in to conversations surrounding like whatever I'm talking about, right? Like if it's, when you to purchase equipment, or what's the best time to buy cryptocurrency, that sort of stuff, right? So it's really fun.
Yeah. No, that's fascinating. I mean, there's a bunch of different ways you can take it, and like you said, you're managing the input, and you're still an artist in that process. I think there's something really. I mean, some of the artists are concerned about AI art, but I've also seen other artists use that as a tool to create some pretty impressive and amazing pieces. That they are certainly an active participant in using this tool. I think there's a fear that some people have, that it's not a tool, that it's a thing. It's become self-aware, or will become like that. And I don't know, maybe you go down that Terminator route at some point. But right now it's still very much a tool that's incredibly powerful. I'm not entirely sure what we're working with, but with the inputs and stuff too. You bring up another similar point. I mean, right now, if you ask ChatGPT questions, it can give you skewed answers. Somebody recently, for example, asked it to write a poem about Donald Trump, admiring Donald Trump, and it says it can't do that. But then if you ask it to write a poem admiring Joe Biden, it writes the poem. It does similar responses when you ask it about fossil fuels and renewable energy. Now, it it doesn't it's not a person that doesn't know what it's doing. It's pulling input, like you're talking about.
Mhm.
It's taking all the data that's out there, and it's probably getting it from mainstream media. I don't know, which is why it comes up with sometimes what appear to be the biased outputs. Because if the inputs going in are somewhat skewed initially, you're going to get that output. So it needs maybe I don't know that training, but like you're talking about and refinement, which certainly isn't there yet. Um, but if people dig into it and use those tools in amazing ways, you can create really really interesting, powerful, and beautiful things. I asked it recently to write a press release for us to see how well it did. And it was pretty dang good.
Mhm.
It asked for my input. Okay, what's the top line? What's it about? Da da da. But it did the format. It made the quotes. And I ended up, I wrote my own. But you could use that. You could, and that could save an incredible amount of time. You got to wonder what impact it's going to have on high school kids. I'm not sure they're going to have to write essays anymore once they figure this out and dial that in a little bit. Things like that. But okay, fine. Then we're going to have to evolve and become more creative.
Right, it's all about, like, moving forward, like you were kinda talking about earlier, our process through what I would call the digital transformation is accelerating at an incredible pace. It's no longer the days of it takes a century to go from agricultural revolution to the industrial revolution, right? And now it takes, a couple decades as opposed to centuries. And you can see that start to develop as technology's gotten, more and more advanced. I mean, and to your point, as far as the essays and stuff goes, I mean, nobody knows how to program anymore, like in binary. or at least even if they do, they wouldn't waste their time doing such, right? They're going to use a programming language. It's really no different at the end of the day. And
Yeah.
you're just there to learn how to utilize that tool and go from there. As far as the inputs and the bias, that's always a fun philosophical debate, especially as it comes into like the cyberpunk scene and all of that. We could get into things, this idea of like a collective manifestation, right? Like to where, and it kind of even, it started, I think it's uniquely digital, right? Where you could say that we even collectively manifested the election of Donald Trump through putting it as a joke in a Simpsons episode, but then it was like in everybody's psyche. And so we manifested it
Yeah, it
just by
became a
nature of
self-fulfilling,
that.
yeah,
Yeah,
self-fulfilling prophecy or something.
right,
Yeah,
exactly.
yeah,
So it's extremely interesting, right?
yeah.
I do want to bring it back a little bit to Vibe because I have a lot more questions, details, right? Available on decentralized exchanges. Which decentralized exchanges is it available on? Can you give me, obviously, after this down in the description, links to the contract address, that sort of thing, so people can go hit that up and get it added to their wallets?
Yeah, you bet, absolutely. Let me just touch on one other thing really quick before we move on to back to Vibe. You know, like you were, my my great grandfather, like I was talking about, experienced more change in his lifetime than probably all the previous lifetimes of his ancestors combined. I mean, his grandparents were in the time of the Civil War. My kids don't know what it's like not to have internet and phone. I'm probably the last generation that grew up. I didn't get an internet account until college because our professor forced us to go to the computer lab because he was putting the syllabus out in the computer lab, so we had to all go get email accounts. It was a major pain. Nobody wanted to do it, and so that's kind of back to the decentralized exchanges really quick. Yeah, we're on the AlgoFi and Pact decentralized exchanges. You can go on there and you can trade Vybe. There's liquidity pools that we've predominantly provided. It's sufficient liquidity for the level that we're at right now. They work great. I've been impressed with the decentralized exchanges. I will tell you what they don't do very well is the traders aren't on there, the big traders. As a company, if you want the trading use case, which for most cryptocurrencies is the only use case, and one of the largest use cases of crypto in many ways is trading and speculation. You're not really going to get that on a decentralized exchange. They're not moving big money on there. They're more on the centralized exchanges. And currently, we're just on those decentralized exchanges, which I like. But if we want to unlock a bigger market and also use a trading use case, then we're going to have to get on a bigger exchange. But I'll certainly send you the links to those and how to buy and sell and convert and swap Vybe. If your audience is pretty sophisticated, but if anybody hasn't used a decentralized exchange, yeah, I mean it's pretty impressive.
Yeah, I think everybody here should be familiar with it, and I can do a little guide for them as well, that could make it even easier so they can follow step by step if you want to send that over to me. Um, this is an interesting one when we start talking about decentralized exchanges versus exchanges occur, especially under the current climate surrounding cryptocurrency, especially with the kind of SEC bringing the hammer down on Kraken here just recently, and if that is even going to be a viable option as far as like a centralized exchange that has more traditional finance integrated into it, right? Which is where the money is coming from, is essentially the traditional finance portion of that, the big money that's coming in and trading on those exchanges. But from my perspective, and I'd like to hear your thoughts on it, it's almost a good thing. Well, I don't know. I feel like it is a good thing that the path that we're moving towards is basically the government forcing people into a decentralized exchange platform, right? Because there's no way, to your point earlier, that they're going to keep up with the technology there,
Yeah,
and banning
yeah,
all of that's going to be nearly impossible.
yeah,
And if they're just going to cut it off at the point of where it integrates with the traditional system, everybody's going to start opting out to a certain extent, right? And if it's
Yeah.
accelerating as fast as it has been, that may happen a lot quicker, and these nation states might actually collapse, similar to something like the sovereign individual predicted in that book from the 90s.
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple good points there to touch on. I mean, boy, if you're Gemini or you're Kraken, Coinbase, you got to be frustrated, right? You're like trying to do everything right. Gemini's trying to, start, or have what they do, but they've launched out of New York, which is one of the most regulatory heavy financial environments in the world, and they've done that since day one because they've wanted to be compliant. They're trying, they probably spend a fortune in legal fees to do all that. Meanwhile, you see another exchange that's running a little bit more cowboy shooting from the hip a bit. Binance, for example, some of the others that aren't bound to the same degree, like some of the U.S. based exchanges. Well, Binance US, for example, is a lot different than regular Binance, right? So it's got to be tough if they're trying to operate in that environment. Now, the counter argument to that is, boy, if you can, well, FTX is a great example. The counter argument to that right there. You want some regulation. If you can do that good, you can bring in a lot more money. The big money is not in the small time traders, the libertarians here and there that are just trying to go peer to peer and operate outside the system. The big money is in the institutions, the banks, like you mentioned. So if you can create some confidence and trust with some rudimentary regulatory framework, that's powerful. That brings more money into crypto. In many ways, you want that. Now, you don't want to strangle, you don't want to go too far with that. You don't want to strangle it. You don't want to force companies overseas. With cryptocurrency startup that we have, for example, and as a founder, you keep an eye on it because we're incorporated in Wyoming. Wyoming is a very crypto friendly state, for
Mhm.
example. But if the United States if they came down too hard and went too far with that, as a crypto company, you don't need to have a storefront on Madison Avenue. It's like, well, why don't we just move offshore? And you've seen that with several companies, and they do that, and they have a competitive advantage um, in many ways. So it'd be interesting to see which way that goes. And like you said too, I do think it forces more people to use. I would love to see more trading on the decentralized exchanges. The centralized exchanges didn't have the best year last year,
Yeah.
and meanwhile those dexes are cranking away and working. But also as a business owner, you're like, dang, man, use case is speculation and trading in many ways. And you want that volume, you want that liquidity. It's like, okay, maybe we got to get on one of these centralized exchanges. You got to create the liquidity for that. You frequently have to pay for that. Is that something you want to do? That becomes a strategic decision as a company. Um, you know, uh, but there's just probably not enough volume for the big players on the decentralized exchanges yet.
Well, it's a unique problem, right? Because what we're faced with right now, as it's kind of in this flux stage between what I would consider the future of money and what money is traditionally. And because you're in that in between stage, there's this facilitation that has to be brought in through centralization, right? So I've always kind of put it this way, like once you participate within any nation states or within any particular economy, right? You have to adhere to those economies rules, right? You have to adhere to that system. So if you want to participate within the US dollar, then you're going to have to adhere to those rules as you pull out of cryptocurrency, right? But once you're in that, it all comes down to the amount of services that start to adopt it on that kind of layer one level, right? Where, you know, or even layer two, right? Layer three would be when you get to centralized exchanges. So it really comes down to when the services become available on layer one and layer two, then there is no need for the centralization portion of that, right? And so what it comes down to, I think, at the end of the day, is innovation within each individual industry sector to adopt cryptocurrency, right? Because if I no longer have to convert out into the US dollar to buy my groceries, then I can now feasibly completely opt out of that entire system, right?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. That's the dream, right? You don't even have to keep converting and paying those transaction fees, the transaction costs going through the banks, not going through the banks. And that was what Satoshi envisioned, 13, 14 years ago now. Uh, and I think we're moving that way in many ways. I also think more things are going to be tokenized. I think you could tokenize almost anything, and there's advantages to that too. You got to create that environment for innovation. Um, Let me touch on the other, because your show is really into tech, which is interesting. So the other use case that we have, aside from tokenizing your likes, is we can take QR codes, and you can load them with cryptocurrency, and then you can scan that QR code and get a payment of cryptocurrency from that. So for example, they're called bounties. We have a follow bounty that you can put on Twitter, and it's QR code. You can load it with crypto. You post it on your Twitter. People go to it and they can scan it for following you. They have to follow you. That has a lot of technical applications. That's the first thing that we've done with it. But we're also exploring putting NFTs on there, so you can scan those QR codes. And this is utilizing the blockchain. You can't do it with credit cards. What if you got a nickel every time you walked into the Gap, 7-Eleven, McDonald's, a dime, whatever? What if you put Google Maps on the blockchain? If you combine the geolocation on your phone with the power of microtransactions in a blockchain, say you hike to the top of Picacho Peak in Arizona, and your phone crosses those geocords, and bam, automatically you get an NFT that says you were there. Or you get a microtransaction that says, it rewards you for $1 for, moving into that space. There's just so much you can do with blockchains and cryptocurrency and innovation. It's exciting to see and develop that. And honestly, as a company, all the regulatory stuff is difficult. It's a cost. It costs time. It costs money. You can pay lawyers. You want to be responsible. You want to do it correctly. But as a founder also of a startup, there's a lot of gray areas. So it's not entirely clear, if what you're building, what the regulatory framework is for that. Now, luckily, we're not, in the banking space too much. That'd be even more complicated. We're not an exchange in any way. We're predominantly just tokenizing things and making micropayments. But it's all that is a cost, and it's something that you need to really focus on and get your ducks in order.
Yeah, the use cases are kind of endless, like you're talking about. And some of the things that I think about all the time, especially when we're talking about the removal of livelihoods of people being, or basically the livelihoods of individuals being replaced by uh, technology. And the interesting concept there, because obviously that causes a lot of fear, but from my perspective, I see that as an extreme positive, because what it should allow you to do, especially if enabled by the blockchain properly, is it should allow people to start monetizing what they actually want to do. And if they do that and they become more creative, then
Yeah,
eventually we're just
yeah,
compounding on top of what we've already created in the United States, to a certain extent, where innovation is now focused on, right? Because you can't be innovative if you are oppressed. Like, we've discovered that as far as humanity is concerned, we've discovered that we can't be innovative and advance forward if we are being oppressed in some manner, right? If you wake up every day and you have to worry about, going hunting and getting food and fending off like attackers and that sort of thing, you're not going to sit down and philosophize about the meaning of life. And you're not going to think about what could I make life better? How could I make life better? Because the only way you can immediately make life better is by surviving. And if that's your one focus, then that's all you can do. What we've ended up going into at like post-industrial age, which is extremely interesting, is due to the centralization of control. And basically the biggest problem that I think has plagued industrialization overall has been slavery. And there's many forms of slavery, right? That I think, like, obviously there's the most grotesque forms that we have sort of grown out of as a society thanks to technology, right? But it appears to still be in place to a certain extent. Like, there's this idea that you need to go work really hard at some mundane task from 9 to 5 for a majority of your life, when in reality all that ends up doing is stifling innovation, because if that's your only thing that you do the entire time, you're never going to be able to grow. And so I think that that's our current like hurdle. Like, if people get over that and go, oh, now I can find my own purpose, now I can find my own way through this, then you're going to just accelerate the advancement of the human race, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, every minute you spend doing your taxes to account for a microtransaction in cryptocurrency trade is a minute where you're not in a creative space. That's a regulatory space. You got to do that, of course. You got to pay your taxes and everything. But if there's too much of that, yeah, you can't. You got to have that freedom to really let the mind wander and let the technology create and move. And you're also touching on the creator economy. That's
Mm-hmm.
big for us in many ways because I think all that's changing. The COVID lockdowns promoted that in many ways, that people realize, hang on, we can do more of this work where we want, how we want, from home, on the computers, on the road. We now have the technology to do that in many ways. At the end of the day, and it's hard to there's a lot of advantages comes with going to lunch with somebody, having a drink with somebody, spending some time with somebody, breaking bread, eating, but you can get a surprising amount done pretty effectively remotely. Our team is spread out. We have 2 developers in India, one in the Philippines, quality control in the Philippines. We have another developer or a moderator in Russia, Dubai, United States. Most of our team I've never even met in person, but the developers, I feel like I've known them a decade.
Mm-hmm.
Just through constant running chats, video calls, working on them. Never met them in person. So the world's changing. The technology's making that possible. I think it's a fantastic thing. It just gives people the freedom. And like you're talking about, with that freedom comes innovation and creation, because it brings with it creativity. And if that freedom doesn't exist for whatever reason, self-imposed, government, slavery, just incapable of having that freedom because you're 14 years old and you're working in a cobalt mine in the Congo or something.
Mm-hmm.
I lived in the Congo for 2 years. It's very hard. You can't innovate, you can't create. These technical tools that we're talking about fosters a lot of that innovation. We're really in a Cambrian explosion of technology. You see that even, okay, like with the cryptocurrencies, being more philosophical here, Bitcoin, obviously the first one, 2014, there was a handful. I mean, Ether went on Coinbase, I think, in December 2016, around that time frame. I might be off, but I'm not off by too much. That's kind of crazy. That wasn't that long ago. Before that, Ethereum wasn't even, on Coinbase.
Mm-hmm.
And since then, just think of the number of tokens, the number of cryptocurrencies that have just exploded. Now, like the Cambrian, geologic time example, not all those are going to survive, but some will. The dot-com bubble was the same, just this
Mm-hmm.
huge explosion, and out of that came a lot of carnage and a lot of sophisticated technical innovation. So it's fascinating to live in that time and see it firsthand. I think we lack. It's difficult to have the perspective to see who. I mean, would you have bet on a book company, Amazon, in the '90s to become one of the dominant internet companies? Probably, maybe not. So we're just seeing this move in a bunch of different ways. That's exciting. Circling back to your previous point, the governments period can foster that. Big business can foster that, or they can stifle that and choke that. So it's interesting to navigate and build in that space. But at the end of the day, it's about building. In some ways, I don't even mind a bear market, because if you're focused on building, now is the time to do that and position yourself for when the bull market comes around. And there's other advantages to it too. You're not distracted. You don't have as much competition. You can position yourself. You can concentrate. You can focus on the tech and building the infrastructure.
And I'm glad you brought up the tech, because I do have a couple tech questions surrounding Vybe now too, because obviously this channel is primarily focused on cryptocurrency mining, specifically, in proof of work algorithms. And you guys chose to deploy on Algorand, which is a proof of stake algorithm. And so I wanted to get your thoughts on why you chose Algorand. I know you had talked about, obviously, like earlier, like the speed of the transactions and that sort of stuff. Uh, were there other proof of work options that you looked at deploying on? And if so, what were they? And then what were the reasons for the final decision to go to Algorand?
Yeah, so we can capture the most value by using the microtransaction use case. I mean, all of our transactions, like, if you're paid a nickel for going to 7-Eleven, or if I'm paid, or a digital location, if I go to watch your channel, if I go to your Twitter and you give me a QR code that I can scan and get 4 cents, 20 cents, $1 out of that, this microtransactions, we need that. We need fast and cheap. That's the predominant technical advantage that we need to capture that value and use that and fold that into the products. And that's what gives the products use case and gives the products value beyond just trading and speculation. So that was the predominant criteria that we looked at when choosing which blockchain, proof of stake, proof of work, important topics, but on a day-to-day basis, just don't factor into that as much. Solana, there was a lot of people are building on Solana. The community is big. There's a lot of developers.
I lost. Oh, okay. Gotcha.
Yeah, I'm back. Sorry. So there was a lot of, I don't want to say pressure, but there's a gravitational pull to build on something like Solana, which is fine. But we've been able to be pretty successful so far with what we're doing. And it's really just capitalizing on the power of blockchain to make fast and cheap transactions in a peer-to-peer way that's decentralized.
Yeah. So I mean, like because obviously the big problem with Solana is the amount of downtime it's experienced over its lifetime already, with like seven
Yeah,
collapses
totally.
within like
I'm glad we didn't build on it. We
a
kind of dodged the
year.
bullet there. Yeah.
Yeah, that was pretty intense. And a lot of proof of work guys will point to that and say, that's an obvious problem with proof of stake in general. So it's kind of hard. You're not going to convince a lot of proof of work guys, I think, on proof of stake quite yet. And so I always like to get other people's perspective on, why they decide to go with like, a proof of stake platform, and kind of hammer that out, because I do think that there's, clear advantages to, I think, ease of use with proof of stake to a certain extent from what I've seen. At the same time, some of the disadvantages are, usually pretty dependent on how centralized it is, right? So, what I've noticed, right, is that you have Solana, which is probably the most centralized proof of stake chain, which appears to have the most amount of issues, right? So the more centralized you are as a proof of stake chain, the more issues you have.
Yeah.
probably pushing you closer to something like Cardano. I'm not familiar enough with Algorand, to be honest, and I do need to do some more research on it. So it's kind of what I think as far as that's concerned. But I'm definitely going to
Yeah,
do
I
some
mean,
more.
I'm glad we didn't go with Solana because of some of the problems that they have. But at the same time, I want to be agnostic as possible. I mean, what we need in the tech is fast and cheap, and effective, and all the other things, proof of stake, proof of work, important. Um, but we need, we're looking at execution at this point. And there's so much tribalism also in the cryptocurrency world with the different tokens and chains. Um, and I don't think, if there's something that can perform better, algorithms worked well for us, but I'm not going to sit up here and tell you that it's the best blockchain. I almost don't care. Like, as long as it's working for us and it's fast
Mm-hmm.
and it's cheap, and it has a positive community, and it does, that makes a big difference. But most of the crypto communities are fairly, fun and positive. Dogecoin, for example, I mean, it's got a great community, right? Um, but that tribalism, you get your coin and you're like, okay, this
Yeah.
one and none other. And I think that's, not great for crypto either. If we can bridge and we can, roll into other blockchains, great, let's do it, right? It increases use case, it increases the size of the neural network, the community. Um, yeah, I'm not wedded to, and I don't, I think that tribalism, it can be dangerous. Um, I mean, boy, you saw how toxic it got between, Bitcoin and Bitcoin Cash during the fork, and how those two communities have really migrated apart from each other based on a pretty fascinating philosophical difference on what Bitcoin should be. What potentially Satoshi envisioned it as, what some of the core developers envisioned it as, and then the fork that happened there, and it was. I mean, I experienced it at the time, read about it, followed it, experienced the fork. And if you did, some of that history I think is kind of lost, but very interesting to witness. And it was an important philosophical discussion. What is Bitcoin? Is it gold? Is it peer-to-peer money transactions that are fast and cheap? Do you raise the size of the blocks, or do you keep them capped at 1 megabyte? At the same time, it created a lot of toxicity and negative animosity, and really divided the cryptocurrency community, which prior to that point had been fairly unified. I mean, you could see the split starting and those questions already arising, all the way back, I think 2000, yeah, maybe even 13, 14 for sure. So I, that tribalism, I think, can hurt. At the end of the day, the the real advantage of the crypto is what it can do that banks, blockchains, governments, third parties can't do. If there's one blockchain that can do that better for X, if BTC is better as digital gold and a back, fantastic. If there's another one that's better for peer-to-peer transactions to go buy my coffee in 2 seconds instead of 20 minutes and a $20, great. There's probably space and use case for both of them in different ways. And let's use whatever one works best for the application that we're trying to build on. It's interesting to see the government get involved in trying to decide, okay, proof of stake, proof of work, what is what, and how do we regulate it. But from a building and tech perspective, like, just get me what works effectively, and if we have to migrate or change or expand, let's do that. Let's not box ourselves into this is my tribe, this is my team, and everything else is horrible.
Well, you do bring up the interesting point specifically, and I was already preparing to ask you this specific question, and it pertains to the SEC's observance of proof of stake is basically a security at this point, and so if they start coming down on proof of stake chains, and as we've seen, a majority of those chains are hosted in the U.S. by big tech companies in the U.S. like Amazon, AWS, and they put some sort of policy in effect where big tech starts shutting down these proof of stake coins or networks, you know, are you prepared to move to a proof of work platform, right? Is that something you would consider?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. If we need to move and migrate, no problem. Like, great. If there's a more effective way to do something that captures that value, yes, we will. Now, that said, that's easier said than done. You have a whole ecosystem that supports these chains. With Algorand, for example, you have the decentralized exchanges, you have the wallet, you have the foundation. You would have to change all of that. So what do you remint your token on a different chain, and then you provide some sort of complicated swap
Be
like
a
Luna?
bridge. Well,
Yeah,
I mean, you
like
could there. I mean, feasibly,
yeah,
you can have a bridge where you are present. I mean, what I would recommend personally is that you start practicing interoperability and you have the Vybe token on Ethereum, Binance Smart Chain,
yeah,
Algorand,
yeah.
Ergo, everything. Like that would probably be. That's what I would like personally put on my roadmap, right? If I was y'all, I'd say, look, we need to make sure that we're gonna be okay no matter what at the end of the day, right?
Yeah, and that's a great point because if your tech goes down, how about the companies that had built, only on Luna
Hmm.
8 months ago? And they're if that fails in some way, yeah, that it's a great point. If you can expand and use these bridges and touch, and I think the cryptocurrency community in general is going to move more towards that. Um, there's a lot of singular focus stovepipes right now, but uh, the real power is in that connectivity.
Yeah, I think interoperability is going to be absolutely massive moving forward. I mean, that's why I pay attention to projects like even more centralized like Binance Smart Chain that's really encouraging interoperability between all the chains, right? Like, because they're kind of dead in the water if ETH breaks any kind of bridge with them, right? Which is like a big deal, and the same goes for pretty much anything else. You got the interoperability between Ergo and Cardano, and you got the interoperability between Flux and everything on the planet for whatever reason, but it's they're doing really good on the Zell hash side of thing or Zell core wallet side of thing. But let's go ahead and take a bio break real quick. I'll send you another meeting invite and we'll get it all wrapped up. I want to ask you a little bit more about what we can do for the audience on the QR codes, and then we'll go from there.
Yeah,
Cool.
awesome.
All right. See you in a sec.
It's great how you reach out to talk to founders and stuff and different people and getting the weeds on the tech too. It's
Yeah.
good.
Welcome back.
Yeah.
So I hope you had a good bio break. I needed it for sure. I drank too many monsters today.
More than one? Oh
Yeah,
man,
it's not good.
you'll, you'll be up late.
It's a problem. It's rough.
There's worse problems there.
So, so people can find you at vibecrypto.com and they can register over there and start mining now
Yeah,
effectively.
you
Is
bet.
that my
Yeah,
understanding? And
mind your
then
social media.
perfect, cool. And then as far as yeah, I know you had something planned, I guess, for my viewers. First of all, I guess there's going to be a QR code that we can put on the screen. Can I just say that we're going to put that on the screen
Yep,
now and we'll pop it up and everybody
yep.
can start scanning? I'm not a huge advocate of scanning QR codes because I think that there's definitely some websec concerns there. So everybody don't use this as common practice, but I'm gonna let it go for now so that you guys can earn some crypto and get kind of play around with the platform. I just want to put that disclaimer out there as far as don't go around scanning a bunch of QR codes.
Yeah, you got to know what you're scanning. But yeah, this is a good way to experience the tech. This QR code is loaded with cryptocurrency. You can scan it, get a microtransaction. It'll automatically be sent to your wallet. You have to have an Algorand wallet. This is the Vybe token. You can turn around and convert that to another cryptocurrency if you want in one of the dexes. It's a digital treasure hunt in many ways. You can cash. There's a bunch of use cases for this. You can cash this middle of the Mojave Desert. You go there and you scan the QR code and it's proof of location. Talking about proof of work earlier, proof of stake. How about proof of location? I was there. I was in the middle of the Mojave Desert. You can use those for that because it's registered on the blockchain once you scan it. In this case, we're rewarding it's a giveaway for your users for their attention and their time is worth something. So they watch the show and they can scan this code and boom, automatically be sent a little bit of crypto. You can put it in a blog. You read my blog, you get 100 Vybe. You get a nickel, you get a dime. It can be used that way as well. Also for advertising, come to this location, come to the Burning Man conference. First 1,000 people get $100. That QR code expires. You post it at your conference. You post it at Burning Man, at your concert, at your bar. That's what we're building. We're going to have NFTs likely also that can be distributed this way, digitally. Yeah, so happy to do it. It's fun. If you do it, you can see the tech now. It's another use case for crypto. People, if you ask them what are the use cases, sometimes those answers are fairly limited. Peer-to-peer transactions, borderless, all that. These microtransactions are another example of that, which we're trying to capitalize on and incorporate into our tech.
Sweet. So we'll throw up a QR code, and then what would be your suggestion for the best mobile Algorand wallet to integrate with this?
Yeah, you can use any wallet. I love Para. It's just what I use. Fantastic UI, interface, execution. They also, for example, have a QR code to opt into Vybe and other tokens, any token that's on the Algorand blockchain. I'll send you that as well. Maybe worth putting in the comments or something to make it easy. So the Para wallet is fantastic. They have good customer service, and the CEO is a good guy too. So that's an excellent wallet, but any of the other ones will work too.
Awesome. And does that wallet obviously let you control your own private keys?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I'll say this, one of the I mean, I don't want to, be too tribal and rant on about one blockchain being better than the other, but one of the nice things about Algorand that was also attractive to me personally when I first got involved with it was that you can do just that. You can stake your tokens by still having control of them and not sent to a third party, and those staking rewards automatically sent to your wallet. So yes, all of that, you keep your keys 100% for sure. You definitely want to do that.
And what would be the most needed pairing if people wanted to add liquidity between Vybe and something else on the Algorand blockchain? Is that pairing going to primarily just be with the Algorand token? Is that the one you really want to build up right now?
Yeah, we have two liquidity pools. The packed one is USDC
Okay.
and Vybe. People could add liquidity to that, or they could swap back and forth from that. You get USDC on Coinbase, you can buy Vybe, vice versa. The one on AlgoFi is Algo and Vybe. There's a few other smaller pools out there, but they don't have much liquidity, and we're not putting liquidity into them. We're pretty small at this point. We have a small community. We're growing. We only launched this bounty hunter, for example, 2 weeks ago. And then the mining, getting paid to post and mining your social media, we launched that in August. So, we're young, we're growing. That's where we're at.
Cool. And you guys can check out the main website for the tokenomics if you're worried about that. I guess the only last question, of course, would be where is your liquidity funding coming from? And is there potential for more coming later on? And what are your plans as far as that's
Yeah,
concerned?
great question. Strategic resource management question. We're providing all the liquidity at this point. We're self-funded. We can do a raise. We did not do an initial coin offering. We didn't do that. We minted the same number of tokens that Algo has to keep it simple. If we, as a startup, if you raise, yeah, that comes with some advantages. You get a nice chunk of money. You also get new bosses. You get new timelines. You have a burn rate. There's other stresses that come with that as well. So right now we're self-funded, but yeah, you're gonna want to grow and expand at some point.
Cool. Well, thanks for coming on, Doug. It was a fun conversation. I hope to have you back on at some point if you want to chat more about other things in cryptocurrency and just kind of have a fun little chat. I thought today was pretty fun getting kind of not just talking about Vibe, but talking about some other stuff and higher level stuff. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah, I love it. The philosophical talk about crypto, I could talk about crypto for a long time. War stories and history, and it's just fascinating. Like I was saying earlier, there's a new drama every couple of weeks. Um, so yeah, it'd be fantastic to just talk about things in general as well. It doesn't just have to be about what we're working on, but there's a lot going on out there. It's an amazingly energetic and creative, innovative space that attracts creators. It's just fun all around. I love it, and so thanks for the opportunity to spend some time talking about some of these things. And yeah, love to do it again.
For sure, man. So signing off, tell everybody where they can find you. Twitter, Discord, Reddit, Instagram. Give us the
Yeah.
rundown on where you want people to hook up
Yeah,
with you.
well, all of that because we're creator social media based company. So we have all those accounts, but we're predominantly most of our news announcements usually come out on Twitter first. So Vibe underscore crypto at Twitter. Vibecrypto.com is our application interface. Um, and you can get to all the other locations from there. We have Discord, we have Telegram, that sort of thing too. But yeah, thanks for checking us out, looking at the tech, and really just considering the use case. I keep trying to bring everyone back to use case, like the companies that are going to survive. Well, we mentioned this, before earlier, talking about consensus when you're there. You look at some of these companies at these conferences and you're like, these guys aren't going to be around a couple of years from now, a year from now, because you got to have use case. You got to
Mm,
actually build something of value, and if we can't do that, we won't be either. So we're trying to focus on the power of microtransactions, tokenization, uh geolocation combined with the blockchain and automatic payments. Yeah, we got to build use case.
perfect. Thanks everybody for watching. Thanks for Doug for coming on. We'll see you guys next Tuesday.